Hi there, I'm Brandon, and this is the Dirt Church Devotional. I've been thinking a lot lately about change and about transition, and I know that makes a lot of people nervous. Some people just absolutely hate change, and then there's other people on the other side of the spectrum that they love change for change's sake. And I tell you what, I'm neither opposed to change, but I'm not a fan of change for change's sake. So anyway, back to the point. In the end of Deuteronomy and the first part of Joshua, we see a lot of change. And we need to understand that this change, as hard as it is, or as hard as it can be, actually is good and is important for us, is necessary. So in the end of Deuteronomy, Moses dies. And then the Lord speaks to Joshua. Now, if you've read through Deuteronomy, if you've read through Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, the nation of Israel's story as they leave Egypt and travel through the desert, you know that God has already been preparing Joshua for this leadership role. And Moses had asked God to make sure that when his time was up, that he would provide somebody. So Joshua is now ready to lead, and the Lord simply comes to Joshua and says, look, Moses is dead. Get ready. You're going to lead. And so I guess that's the first change that we see right there is a change in leadership. And that's not always bad. Sometimes it's really good to get some fresh blood in there. Now, in their case, it was probably a lot easier to accept because Moses is gone. And they really didn't have any choice. I mean, you can't follow a guy that's not there, right? So there's been a transition in leadership. The next thing, though, it's not really spelled out. You have to read through their journey, through Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and then into Joshua, and understand this next one. They went from, in their journeys in the desert, from having the presence of God with them in a pillar of cloud during the day and a pillar of fire at night, to nothing. Once Moses dies, and once they cross the Jordan River and they get into the Promised Land, that pillar of cloud and that pillar of fire was gone. Now, that might not seem like much, but the reality is that they had to go from walking by sight. They could always see that cloud. They could turn around and find out where the presence of God was. It tells us that when the cloud settled down, then the Israelites would set up camp. And then when the cloud lifted, they would leave. And so there was no question about, okay, what is God doing? Where does he want us to be? But now that they're in the Promised Land, that cloud disappeared, and they have to learn how to walk by faith and not by sight. The Bible tells us that that's something that we need to do too. We got to learn how to walk by faith. We've got to develop that relationship with the Lord and maturity to know his voice and to be able to follow him, the faith to follow him. And then the third change that I found that I think is really maybe a tough one to swallow. If you look there as I don't remember if it's chapter 2, 1, 2, 3, something. Anyway, the first couple of chapters in Joshua, the people have celebrated. It's the first time they're celebrating the Passover in the Promised Land. And there's just a little piece that says, after they celebrated that Passover, the manna stopped appearing, and they began to eat of the produce of the land. Now, not only did the manna stop, but also, throughout that 40 years, their shoes didn't wear out, their clothes didn't wear out. God really miraculously provided for them. And it seems a little bit strange, maybe again hard for us to swallow at times, that what happened to Israel happens to us. See, as they got into the Promised Land, God said, all right, now you're in the Promised Land, you're going to start working for your food. You're going to start working for these things that I have just handed you before. For those 40 years, they didn't have to sow or reap or do anything. They just had to go out and collect that manna. But now in the Promised Land, the manna stops. The miraculous provision stops. And the reality is, as we get closer to God, as we draw near to him, as we grow closer to that Promised Land that he's taking us to, some of the provision might fall off. Some of the obvious signs that we had grown used to might disappear, and we really need to put our hand to the plow. And we've got to, again, walk by faith. And, as James says, we have to be doers of the word and not just hearers. So there was a time where they were learning in the desert. There's a time as we are new in Christ and we're growing that we're learning. But then there comes a time where we have to put our hand to the plow and start practicing what we preach, practicing what we read and hear and understand, and learn how to build this relationship with God. Why don't you chew on that for a while? Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time.